Hello, and thanks for joining us on Encore. Coming up in today's show, we head to the southern city of Arles for our annual photographic rendezvous. This year's edition takes us on a visual voyage with a special focus on Latin America. Capturing the faces of child brides, Stephanie Sinclair documents those who are too young to wed in a new show here in Paris. And photographer Paz Errazuriz joins us in the studio to talk about capturing daily life in Chile during the Pinochet years and beyond. Paz, thanks so much for joining us today. Now, a show of your photographs is being displayed at Arles this year under the title A Poetics of the Human. That show includes images from the beginning of your career in the 1970s. What prompted you to pick up a camera at that time?
Well, I always wanted to photograph street, to do the street photography. And at that time, especially, with the military coup, several photographers started working together and got organized in an association, which helped us, to be a bit more protected from the police. In fact, it was a way to do some kind of political militancy, through photography. So photography was our arm, in a way. We had to, to learn all the strategies of the street. But for me, it was a wonderful experience only, an interesting, fascinating experience. I wasn't a photojournalist, so I started doing my own personal interests, series of different groups of people that attracted me very much during those years, and still now, in fact.
Mm-hmm. And those years you're talking about, Pinochet came to power in 1973, which coincided with the beginning of your career. It was a time of very serious censorship. How did you manage to get your photographs published?
Well, in fact, we didn't publish them in Chile. We sold them to agencies, or, in fact, in some magazines, of course, they would have been censored. So it wasn't our point, to exhibit in Chile. And we were helped by journalists that came to Chile and helped us with film. There was a very shortage of material, photographic material. So we had very interesting meetings with them, and they organized things for us here in France, especially, and in Germany.
Well, indeed, let's take a look at some of those photographs taken by Paz Errazuriz. Now, we can see from that brief selection of photographs that women are very present in your images. What did you want to show about the condition of women in Chile?
Well, in those days, well, even before, feminist movements were strong, and they did protest very firmly against the militaries. And I was part of those groups as a part of the group and as a photographer. So I was always, doing both things at the same time. And they did a very important job, and very organized, and they did protect and and faced the regime with a very critical attitude.
In very dangerous times. Now, we're taking a look at another vision of women as photographed by Stephanie Sinclair. A wedding portrait is often one of the most cherished photos in a family album, yet the images Sinclair captures are not always cause for celebration. In many cases, they feature unwilling brides who are just children themselves. Her latest exhibition is called Too Young to Wed, the result of years spent documenting young girls forced into marriages around the world. Sinclair's work was chosen to open a new photojournalism space here in Paris at La Défense. We went to meet her. In Guatemala, Yemen, Afghanistan, and even in the United States, young girls around the world are forced to marry against their will every 2 seconds. Photographer Stephanie Sinclair has been documenting this phenomenon for much of her career.
What unites these girls is essentially they've all had their childhoods cut short, and they've been forced into very adult roles at very young ages.
Her exhibition, entitled Too Young to Wed, brings together the portraits of those girls. And behind these very young faces, some of the stories are astonishing.
So Najude was married as a little girl, and at 10 years old, she was very tired of being in an abusive relationship and somehow had the wherewithal and courage to go to the courthouse by herself and request a divorce. And she sent shockwaves throughout the Yemeni community, and but she was represented by a female attorney who helped her get the divorce.
Some of the most surprising images in the show come from the US, where Sinclair photographed members of the fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints as they were charged with polygamy and the unlawful marriage of minors. She says that underage marriage is not exclusively a religious or cultural practice, but that it can be symptomatic of socio-economic conditions. That is, in times of conflict and natural disasters, young girls can be too much of a financial burden for their parents.
Even after doing this project for 15 years, I don't believe that parents are trying to hurt their children. I think they just don't really understand often kind of how harmful this is for girls. That, stopping their education means that they can't contribute financially to their communities. It opens them up to more violence.
Her photography is helping to spread that message, but Sinclair has gone one step further, setting up a non-profit organisation to effect real change in these communities and to allow young girls a few more years as children. Paz, in that report we see that Stephanie Sinclair was going into quite intimate, sensitive situations. How do you, as a photographer, negotiate that access to certain places that might be difficult to gain trust, for example, with your subjects?
The way I work is through, it's not short periods. Some series of my work has been taken for 4 or 5 years. I have a very personal interest in some of these groups, so I have to do some research and be like friendly. I want them to know very well what I want to do. So that's how you start living with certain groups.
So it's about creating a relationship.
Yes, and doing some sort of anthropological research, so you can really make them trust you. That's very important for me.
Now, as well as the urban life that you've captured in places like Santiago in Chile, you've also documented the Cahuesca, indigenous people of Chile who live in the very south near the Tierra del Fuego. What was it important for you to show in that series?
Well, first of all, that group, that ethnic group, hasn't been photographed for about 100 years. So that's amazing. I couldn't believe it, that nobody had interest in them. And, well, that was a long work, and I'm still working because I'm doing a documental on that subject.
Now, in your recent projects, and indeed throughout your career, we see the same themes come up: people's role in society, their bodies, their experience of life in contemporary Chile. After Pinochet left power in 1990, how did you see the society evolve, both socially and artistically?
Well, Pinochet regime installed a very hard economy, you know, neoliberalism, and life is not easy. It wasn't easy, the transition. It was democratic, but it took long, you know, to start seeing Chile from real transparent eyes again, you know.
Thank you so much, Paz, for joining us today. And your show, A Poetics of the Human, can be seen in Arles until September 24th. That show is just one of the many, many collections on display in Arles this summer, with 250 photographers featured in this, the 48th year of the festival. It's a very international selection, images that will transport you from Tehran to Tokyo. We'll leave you with a short preview. Remember to check out our website, and you can also follow Encore on Twitter and Facebook. There's more news coming up on France 24 after this.